Good morning. Good morning. How are you? Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I don't know about you, but it's a little chilly where I am, chillier than usual, and I'm loving it. It means I get to wear the snuggly clothes, the joggers and the sweatshirts and the sweaters, and I absolutely adore that, but it does make it really super hard to get out of bed. But that's okay. So, if you are just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna. I am a mom, a nana, a wellness advocate. I am a grad student. I'm in my second week of grad school, which is just amazing to me every single day, and I'm absolutely loving it. There's something about learning new things that definitely breathes new life into me. And I don't know if you're that way, but the best way to find out is to start learning things, right? So I am also a best-selling author. I am an activewear fanatic, and I started Wellness Wednesday because I have been in a lifelong journey with anxiety and depression, and know that just like kind of like a support group, sharing information and having a place to, well, like I said, share information and just kind of discuss what works and what doesn't for different people sometimes makes all of the difference and makes you feel like you have a place to go. Wellness Wednesday, we avoid politics and negativity, but if you ever have a topic, I do love to learn. So if you ever have a topic, if you're watching and you'd like to see me cover it, I have had watchers reach out before and ask me about things, and I love to learn new things, obviously, so I don't mind digging in. Good morning, Muhammad. I absolutely don't mind digging in and learning a little bit more about it to see if it's something I can cover on a future Wellness Wednesday. So let's get started. Last week, World Mental Health Day was the day before, and we talked about the two stories that everybody has, especially if there's someone that is living with some type of mental illness. So the two stories are the one that's the real story, and then the one that we tell people that kind of convolutes that or makes it sound like we're okay or makes us feel like we're okay. So that got me to thinking after last Wednesday. And in the process of doing that Wellness Wednesday, I talked about perception as reality. And it seemed like it was a great follow-up topic for today. So that's what we're going to talk about. So perspective versus perception versus reality versus the truth and what it has to do with wellness. I really wasn't sure I understood the difference between perception and perspective. So I looked it up, and one source on subjective writing says that perception and perspective are separate but intertwined because they constantly influence each other in a circular way. Well, that makes sense to me. Perception is the way you sense and interpret the world, which impacts your point of view, which again influences your perception. So if that's clear as mud, which it kind of was for me, the truth is most people understand these two terms as somewhat interchangeable. And for today's purpose, we're going to use them kind of interchangeably too. So perception is not reality, but it becomes a person's reality because it influences how we interpret what we're seeing, experiencing, etc. Some philosophers argue that reality doesn't exist because we are always experiencing whatever we see or encounter through our own lens of experience and our own lens of knowledge. And there's been more and more talk about that over the last couple of decades. But it's kind of, to simplify it, it's kind of like if the tree falls in the woods and nobody's there to hear it, does it really fall? So there is a truth. There is a reality that exists. Kind of like just because you can't hear, and most of us can't, I unfortunately can. Most of us at my age can't hear a dog whistle, but it doesn't mean that the dog whistle doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean it doesn't make noise. I actually have a funny story about a dog whistle, but that's for another day. So reality should be the truth, but it really usually becomes a consensus of what people perceive as the truth, because the fact is that the tree does still make noise when it falls. But we don't know that if nobody's there to hear it. So there is a truth, and probably 99% of the time, excuse me, y'all, allergies, seasonal, oh my goodness. Anyway, So there really is a truth or a reality, but without the services of a video camera, you really can't get an accurate accounting of that reality because everyone that sees it is looking at it through their own lens. And even with the accounting, with the video accounting or recording of that reality, it could then still be subject to whoever's watching it or reviewing it, right? So that's what we're talking about today is perception. Reality should be the truth, but reality usually becomes the consensus, good morning, Danielle, of the people that are perceiving it as the truth. So if you have 10 people that see a situation one way, and 2 that see a situation the other way, the consensus is going to be that the truth is what those 10 people are seeing. Good morning, Miss Carla. So what affects our perception? Now that depends on who you ask, of course. Most agree that basic life experiences, memories, and how our senses focus most directly affect our own unique perception. But information surrounding the truth, in other words, information that we're fed, has a lot to do with our perception. For example, in one set of beliefs versus another, and you most often see this in politics, and that's the one and only other time I'm going to say that word during this session, is one set of beliefs versus the other is often based on the information surrounding it, the information they're receiving, which is often not correct or not complete. It's not so much that it's not correct, but a lot of things, especially in our media today, are taken out of context. So one set of beliefs versus another is based on the other information at hand. I had a conversation with my boyfriend recently, actually, and we've had it a few times, where we discuss whatever it is, politics, religion, whatever all those taboo subjects that we don't discuss when we're on here are. Whatever the person opposite believes, they believe just as adamantly as we believe. That doesn't make them right or wrong, and it doesn't make us right or wrong. What it means is that we are perceiving the situation, or they are perceiving the situation through their lens of experience and information and what they themselves know to be true, which is on a continuum of change all of the time. So an article from Berkeley University suggests that also, besides the information we're given on any, depending on the subject, our perception is affected by our energy and ability. So what does that mean? Well, it means a steep hill looks steeper when we're tired. It means that something looks farther away when we're tired, when we don't feel capable of doing it. So that's what it means by our energy or our ability. And another thing, and we'll just touch on this a little bit more in a few minutes, is children. Children see things as much farther away or much bigger than they actually are. Some of that legitimately has to do with their size. So everything looks bigger. Not only the things that are in fact physically bigger, but everything. A great example of this was when I went back to Michigan, to my hometown where I grew up, after not being there for 26 years. And I got to the beginning of the street that my old house was on. And y'all, I thought I lived in BFE. I won't go into what those initials, most anybody watching is going to know what that means. I literally thought I lived in the boondocks, okay? That I just lived, I felt as a child so far removed from my friends, from my school, from everything going on in my world. I hit the beginning of that street and I looked at the GPS, and the GPS said my house was 3.12 miles. Now, for those that know, I'm a runner. 3.12 miles is a 5K. And I looked and I went, that's not possible. That's a 5K. That's like right over the hill. That's just not possible. The house must be farther away. I believed that so much so from my perception as a child, because I had not been there for my perception to change, that I literally blew right by the house and ended up having to turn around on a road that was a massive hill nearby. So it was just amazing to me. And it was the first time I ever experienced in reality how things can look so much bigger when they're behind you, or when you're older or more mature and your perception has changed versus when you were small, or when you were looking at them from, when you were looking at the hill from before you started to climb it versus the other side. There's so many places you can go with this, right? So our energy and our ability affects our perception. Also, sometimes our size, our age, or our maturity. How we feel affects our perspective. Again, another conversation with my boyfriend this week, actually. If we are having a bad day, if we are sick and not feeling physically well, or if we are depressed, not feeling mentally well, sometimes things are harder, more painful, like literally physically more painful. We had this discussion. If we're not feeling well, we're tired, we're having a bad day, and one of us stubs our toe, it is a much bigger deal than if we're having a great day and we stub our toe and we're like, well, that was dumb, and we move on with our day, right? So how we are feeling emotionally, physically, mentally on any given day has a tendency to change how we view things that are happening throughout the day. Hunger, interesting factoid. Judges making parole decisions before lunch have been noted to, yes, I have notes because I can't remember all of this stuff without notes. I'm just not that good. Making parole decisions before lunch have been known to deny parole more often. Now, I have talked before, and it's probably time to talk a little bit about food again. We've been working so hard on mindset. How much diet and nutrition can affect all of the things. So I found that to be a very interesting factoid. And of course, it's been said for a long time, and it's been more common knowledge that children who eat breakfast do better in school as far as study, focus, and behavior. So hunger, and I would say my own opinion is that along with hunger, nutrition and the type of ways you're feeding your hunger, have a lot to do with perception. I know that if I'm hangry, I react to things differently. I perceive things differently. I am more likely to perceive a benign comment as a personal attack. I'm more likely to overthink it. Feelings of disgust can make us make us less impartial, less biased. No, sorry. Let me try that again. Feelings of disgust. I'm trying to interpret my own stuff here. Feelings of disgust can make us more biased or less impartial. I guess that is the right words. I don't know why I'm questioning myself. In reacting and evaluating. So what does that mean? I call it, there's actually an effect, and I have to find the information to explain it in further detail. But there's a phenomenon known as the Horner halo effect, okay? And the bottom line is, and I'm going to pick on Carla and Danielle because I know they're both on. So let's say I just really don't like Danielle, okay? Let's say I'm totally disgusted with Danielle. I'm just so aggravated with her. It like hurts to look at her face, okay? And Carla is a new friend, and I've just met her, and I think she's wonderful, and every interaction we've had has been fantastic. Yes, I'm picking on you too because I know you're watching. So Danielle and Carla could both look at me and say exactly the same thing. Danielle could look at me and tell me the sky is blue, and Carla could look at me and tell me the sky is blue. Now, let's even go further than that. They could both look at me and tell me the sky is green. Well, because I'm disgusted with Danielle, and I don't like her, and I'm therefore skeptical of anything that comes out of her mouth, I am going to question her. And I'm going to be like, well, no, the sky's not green. What are you talking about? Where is that coming from? My whole attitude's going to be different. My demeanor, how I approach it, everything. Whereas if my new friend Carla, who I've had wonderful interactions with and have no issues with whatsoever, says the sky is green, I'm going to be like, huh, okay, cool. You see what I mean? So feelings of disgust or the opposite side of that coin, feelings of reverence, if you will, kind of like the difference between rose-colored glasses and not having rose-colored glasses, will affect our perception and make us. Was that an okay example, Carla? Did that work for you? It's been known to be called the horn halo effect. And I myself have caught myself experiencing it more times than I can count. Danielle, I'm glad you found that relatable. That was the best example I could think of to explain how feelings of disgust can make us less impartial in how we react and evaluate. So that's a filter we're looking through. Okay, I'm glad that helped. All right, so whether you're alone versus having company. Now, the best example I have of this is I'm a runner. So I will run by myself. I've never really had any problem working out by myself. But what I've learned over time is if I'm with other people, I work harder. And another phenomenon that's common in the running world is I could be running along. I could be feeling like I have absolutely spent all of my energy, like it's time to quit, like I just can't go any further. But you let another runner come down that street and pass me, and as soon as they're in sight, all of a sudden I'm not tired. All of a sudden I'm not feeling like I'm working as hard. All of a sudden there's this extra burst of energy because I can't let this other runner see me stopping to walk. It is the most crazy thing, but it's true. And that's why group workouts work so well for a lot of people, even if we drag our feet about them, because having company changes the way while we're working out, changes the way we perceive our fatigue and how hard we're working and that rate of perceived exertion. Boy, I'm struggling for words today, y'all. So alone versus company. That's a great, very basic example, but it can go much deeper than that. When I was alone by myself all the time, which a lot of time was self-inflicted due to my social anxiety, anything that happened, anything that went on, I perceived it much differently because I was perceiving it from a lens of abandonment, for lack of a better way to put it, because even though I was inflicting a lot of that on myself, I felt abandoned. So a lot of things seemed worse because I perceived them from that lens. Okay, so how do we change our perception? Enough examples. How do we change our perception? Well, perception changes as we age. Why? Because it's based on experience and it's based on our lessons and the things that we do and the things that we encounter. And that's what changes our perspective over time. For kids, let's start with kids. As children, again, you've heard me say this, everything seems big. Where they live seems far away from where they want to be, from their friends, from whatever. Car rides seem extra long. Feelings seem extra big. Things that happen that adults can take more in stride are big deals for children because they haven't learned to regulate their emotions yet. There it is. I said it. That's from yesterday's grad school lesson. They haven't learned how to regulate their emotions yet. So they're learning by a reciprocal experience between them and their caregivers. But, and that was the picture I painted with my trip back to Michigan after 26 years, is the difference in how things looked and how things appeared and how things affected me versus when I was 10 or 11 and moved away from that area of Michigan, and then at 16 moved out of that area entirely. So everything is big with kids. And it takes time. Just like I said, when we're standing at the bottom of a mountain, we have to climb, proverbial or legitimate. It looks a lot bigger than it does when we get to the top of it. So same idea. Our perception grows as we grow and change with the things we learn and the experiences we have. We can speed that process up. And you probably know what I'm going to say, and that's going to be with mindset work. The more we learn about ourselves and our perceptions, and the more we expose ourselves to experiences, we can change our perception. It's kind of the same thing. So again, a couple of words that we can use interchangeably here. When I was looking at everything from an anxious, socially anxious, depressed, very negative point of view, victim-like, everything always happens to me, everything bad happens to me, I have no luck, I have no this, I have no that. Everything I encountered looked different. I took more things that were never anything but benign comments as personal attacks. I took everything personally, everything. If somebody walked in my office and they weren't smiling, I automatically assumed they were mad at me. And it's the lens I was looking at everything from. Whereas when I started to change my thinking and work on my mindset, and change how I viewed my past and the way I grew up and the things, the negative experiences that I had, and went from a victor to a victor, or victim to a victor mindset, you could say some of those same things to me today and I would laugh at you because they just wouldn't even affect me. I wouldn't perceive them as anything. I'd be like, oh, all right, and keep going with my day. So we can speed up the perception change. Our brains are plastic. You've heard me say that. Does that mean they look like a plastic bottle? No, it means they have a plasticity which allows us to change and rewire. And I love that. And I learned about that the first time I was in college. I continued to kind of touch in on the research a little bit here and there. But it explains so many things that I didn't understand about how I could make the changes that I made. Good morning, Miss Erica. So we can speed up the process by which our perception changes by exposing ourselves to new experiences, stepping out of our comfort zone, and just learning. Simple act of learning. So keep that in mind. And the best way to do that, whether you want to actually change your mindset or not, is, for example, when you research something, research the opposite of your belief, not just what you believe. Don't just look for things that will support your beliefs. This is something I had to tell myself in class yesterday because we were studying emotional regulation. So there was something that the textbook stated that I didn't agree with. It was very black and white, and I felt that that particular subject was not as black and white. So what did I do? I set out to find a reliable source that a vetted, reliable source that could provide an article that would support my argument. But what if you actually did research the opposite of your argument so that you could see the other side? Another example of this before I go on, of what I mean here, and I missed this example and I really, really wanted to use this example. So a grocery store robbery. And you may have heard this story before about how multiple eyewitnesses all have different accounts of what happened. So again, an example of our perception versus reality. Grocery store robbery. 2 people witnessed the robbery, okay? Paul is focused on the robber's gun because it's just like a gun that his dad had, and he knows all about that gun. So in his recount, and he was standing at the front with a friend who was an employee. So he was looking at the robbery through the lens of a protective person, of someone that knew a lot about guns and was able to identify the gun that the robber was carrying, and also had a view of the parking lot, so was able to cite how the robber left the building and got away. Whereas the elderly lady, Sylvia, who was in the store witnessing the robbery, she had a fashion background. She had a materials background. And she also had a husband who wore similar types of shirts. So she didn't know anything about the gun. She wasn't able to support any other eyewitness accounts of the gun or how he left. But she was able, in detail, to tell the police what kind of shirt the robber was wearing and what color and how it fit him and the whole 9 yards. So that is a great example of how we can all look at the same situation and come away from it with completely different information based on our own experiences. So, I used to believe that there were 3 sides to every story, and I prided myself on feeling like I had a more objective point of view. The truth, those 3 sides being mine, the other person's, and the truth. I could easily buy into the no truth argument because, again, if the truth is being interpreted by any one person, it's being interpreted through their lens, right? But I do understand the concept of if the tree fall in the woods, even if nobody's there to hear it, it still makes a noise. So there is still a reality and there is still a truth. How often it's truly seen, because everyone's interpreting it through their lens, is the question. All right, so the point is, because you're like probably wondering, okay, what's the point and what does this have to do with wellness? Well, everything. the sooner we realize that our perception is just that, our perception, and that whomever we are dealing with, whether it's in terms of an argument, a conversation, a debate, passing on the street, is their perceptive, the faster that we can resolve disagreements in any of our relationships. We can also more easily transcend past holding grudges or assuming malicious intent. If we're holding a grudge on somebody that's done something in the past, it's kind of like the walk a mile in my shoes. Can we put them ourselves in their position and view it from their lens? Because that whole exchange, whatever it was, may look completely different to them, good morning, Roy, than it looked to us for completely different reasons. So, this is why counselors often recommend I statements in conversations about expressing emotions to partners, roommates, etc. Because I statements are less accusatory. You're stating your feelings, and your feelings are okay because they are from your perception. By using I statements and continuing to use them through the discussion, you are less accusatory and less likely to undermine your own or someone else's feelings or point of view. So that's what perception has to do with wellness right there. Changing your perception or looking at something from somebody else's perception means that your relationships, your communications are going to be that much better. Convicted. I see convicted from Carla. Oh my gosh, yes, from Danielle. So that is what that has to do with wellness. Your perception and how you view, and more importantly, not just how you view, but your understanding that someone else is viewing it differently is going to make a gigantic difference in how things progress in any of your relationships or interactions. So that's it. Easy peasy, right? Clear as mud. Remember, your reality is not necessarily the truth, nor is someone else's when it's pointed at you. Your perception will change. I had an interesting conversation with a friend who was recently, I won't go into it, kind of accused of toxic positivity. Whether or not you can look at things from the other person's point of view, or more importantly, recognize that their point of view isn't necessarily about you. It's about how they're looking at it. It is easier to get past situations like that. So your perception can change with every experience, and you can speed that process up. We just talked about that. Using I statements in arguments, discussions, etc., and being open to others' viewpoints without judging them as right or wrong, recognizing simply that it's their perspective, can change the game. Why do you see it that way? Okay, thanks for sharing. Now, this doesn't mean run around with the I all the time. That's a whole different subject. But if you are expressing your feelings, I statements like I feel, I think, and not making the other person the subject of them, but more making the action or the feeling the subject of it, goes a long way toward diffusing arguments. I have more stories I could tell, but we will be here all day. So I'm just going to stop now. Can you tell? I just have more. So, and again, just as an additional reminder, your reality is not necessarily the truth, nor is someone else's reality when they're pointing it at you. So I hope you found this helpful. I was really excited about this topic. As you can see, I could go on about it all day. If you found this helpful, please share. And I just so appreciate you being here. 53rd episode of Wellness Wednesday. And next week, obviously, we're probably going to talk a little bit about Halloween, because the next Wellness Wednesday after that is the day after. So not sure what I'm going to do with that yet, but stay tuned. I hope you found this helpful. Again, please share. If you have any questions, want any of the links I was working with. And honestly, there weren't a lot of links. There were a couple, but most of this was me speaking from past experience and memory. So just keep that in mind. Again, it's all from my perception, but I hope that from your perception, you have a fabulous day and be well. And I'll see you next week. Bye.